meeting to order. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes? Rob, can I have a second? Eden? Okay, is there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, let's vote on it. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried, unanimous. We'll go on to the informational items, reports. We'll have the ETSB. Mr. Tuttle.
Mr. Chairman, both the 911 centers are complete, Peoria and Bartonville, so we'll be sending out an open house notice here in the next few weeks to invite the elected officials and administration to come see the new 911 centers. So going very well, and the staff are in both places. So,
We got any questions for Dave? So everybody's happy with the way everything turned out?
yes, we're very pleased with our Peoria Metro as our general contractor, and absolutely did a wonderful job and all their subs. So it turned out very nice.
Wonderful. It's always great when a plan comes together, isn't it? Okay, next we'll have a public defender report. Nate?
The next 2 months, this month and next month and next month's meeting. But I am happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Any questions for Nate today? Okay. Oh, Steve?
Maybe you could just kind of give us an update on your transition to bringing on board, your own staff instead of contracting. Just give us a flavor of where you're at today.
Sure. So we started the year last year, or ended last year and started this year with 2 full-time attorneys, myself and Kevin Lowe, the same way it's been for the last few years, and 1 full-time administrative staff, Kristen, who I think you guys have met before. She's been to these meetings. In March of this year, I hired a full-time assistant public defender who is currently working in traffic court because that's where we had the biggest need. I have another job posting and am waiting for the right candidate, an appropriate candidate for another position. So as soon as I get an applicant that I think is suitable, I think I'm in a position to hire them, and then I have an opportunity to hire 1 more person before the end of the year. So I am continuing to solicit applications and hoping that we find the right people. So that potentially could bring us to 5 full-time attorneys by the end of the year. That's my goal, and my goal is to continue adding full-time attorneys.
That's what I was just going to ask, is you originally had a target of having a set number of full-time attorneys on and then still using outside contract for, I'll say, peak shaving. And now, I guess looking at that, maybe you could just share with us today, knowing what you know, what is your target, you think, 12, 24 months, whatever from now, that when you will achieve your full-time number, what's that full-time number you think you'll add, and then, the timing?
That's a difficult question. Part of, obviously, resources are always going to be one of the biggest determiners of how many additional attorneys we can add, or how many attorneys we can transition from independent contractor into full-time. My hope is that over the next 2 to 3 years, we continue to add full-time attorneys approximately at the same pace we have thus far this year. I mean, I'm hoping a few more next year, maybe a few more after that. I don't know where that sweet spot is exactly between independent contractors and full-time attorneys. Part of the challenge is obviously case volumes, monitoring that, but also each individual courtroom carries with it its own unique characteristics. For instance, there's some courtrooms like juvenile abuse and neglect that have 5 independent contractor attorneys right now, and realistically, we need to have at least 5 attorneys in there in some capacity, whether it's as full-time or independent contractors, because of conflicts that come up between and among defendants. It's very common in that courtroom in particular. So it's hard to say how many full-time and part-time. My goal would be something in the approximate area of 10 to 12 full-time, perhaps, and then have some, if possible, you always have conflicts that arise in the different courtrooms, and other counties similar to ours in size and demographic throughout the state. Generally speaking, even if they are mostly full-time, they're not necessarily all full-time. They still have some conflict in independent contractors, attorneys that work on a limited number of cases. So I think it's probably, my goal would be 2 to 3 a year, if possible, to continue adding full-time employees, full-time attorneys, and perhaps an investigator. But with that, there's lots of additional factors that come into play. I mean, we're going to need more administrative staff to support those attorneys, more infrastructure to support that size of an office. So, but just generally speaking, in terms of attorneys, I would hope, I think our county could be covered, I don't know, somewhere between 10 and 12 full-time attorneys, and then some number of independent contractors, significantly less than we have now.
Thank you. And my last statement would be just continue to monitor the budget transition. So from what was independent contractors on a budget where you turned that in and we worked through it, as you transition to full-time or employees, how do we transition? Because we want to make sure that we're very transparent to the public. We're not adding unnecessary cost, I'll call it. So just, it was more of a comment, not really looking for an answer, but more of a comment. Manage that so we have a very clear, we started in 2019 with this, 2020, and as we migrate forward, here's how the cost of running the public defender's office has trended.
Sure, and I will always and am always mindful and dutiful of being a responsible steward of public resources, and I will continue to do so.
Any other questions for Nate? Phil?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a question for Nate, but I just want to make everybody aware, if you did not know, but Nate's father just recently passed away, and he was a lawyer, and he was a good role model for Nate. I knew Nate's dad for a long time. Rob was a runner at Peoria High School in both cross country and track. He wasn't necessarily the star of the team, but I'll tell you what, he gave effort, and he always kept the team loose because he was fun to be around, and you knew you could always count on him. So it was a great loss to our community because Rob was involved in a lot of different things. And I know all of us would like to extend our deepest sympathy for the loss of his dad.
Thank you, Phil. Yes, our condolences from all of us, Nate. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Nate. Next, we've got information on the contract for X-ray services between OSF, St. Francis Medical Center, and the Peoria County's Coroner's Office. Jamie?
Thank you, Chairman. Historically, over the last, I would assume, greater than 10 years, St. Francis has provided us X-ray services free of charge on our autopsy victims who are either infant, which requires a full-body skeletal survey with a read, victims of a gunshot homicide gets a full-body X-ray, and a gunshot suicide gets an X-ray of the particular area where the gun went in, or the bullet went in. Like I said, historically, this has been provided to us by St. Francis. Back in December of 2020, I met with their chief nursing officer who advised that they were no longer going to be able to provide that service to us free of charge. So over the last 6 months, I've been working with our state's attorney's office and the attorney representing OSF on a contract to work out what's going to be best suited for St. Francis for the citizens of Peoria County and the deceased person as a whole. They did shoot me some prices, which we were back and forth with in their service agreement, and then again back and forth with the state's attorney's office. I've benchmarked what they've priced us compared to a mobile radiology services and Unity Point Health, and St. Francis has provided us the best price for those services, which would probably equal less than $5,000 for the remaining part of this year. So this is informational, and I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Any questions for Jamie right now? So basically, we did pretty good for quite a few years getting free services. And
We were skating by really good, yeah, of course.
yeah. Now, can any of these costs be recouped from the victims' families or not?
They cannot. We could. We can't charge the victim's family for the autopsy services. It's obviously tax-supported service by Peoria County, so it has to be done. It's a standard of practice for the X-rays for specifically a victim of violence and the gun suicides, and clearly infants for determining a cause of death of how the infant died. So it's a benchmark standard practice. So we can't avoid it, unfortunately, but. The very positive out of this is my relationship with OSF stems back to my employment there, and they really provided us a really, really good service with their radiology department and their techs who, take their out of turn at 2 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, it doesn't really matter when, they're there for us. They've always provided a tremendous service to Peoria County, so we're happy to stay with them.
Well, thank you for negotiating a good contract for us, and I guess we need to thank OSF for the good service they've given us all these years. Steve, you got a question?
And maybe Jamie, you might have already commented on this, but just thinking, is this something that we technically would put out to bid or not to other healthcare providers that provide X-ray services? Just make sure we kind of covered that statement or that option.
Yeah, I benchmarked against Unity Point and a mobile service to come in to do it, and St. Francis provided us the best service. So you got to consider the price is by far lower than the other two that I talked to, but you also have to consider the quality of the service compared to a mobile unit to come in and the availability of those films, burning the CDs, having the CDs available for our doctor at a 9 o'clock autopsy time and things like that. So. Collectively speaking, it's the best service, the best quality, and the best price. It's a good question, though.
Any other questions for Jamie? Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on, we're at resolutions. The first one's the intergovernmental agreement between DCFS and Peoria County. Can I have a motion to put that on the floor? Rob, second. Brandy? Okay, who's taking this one?
It looks like Renee is going to handle that.
Okay. Welcome, Renee.
Can you hear me? Is that good? Okay. Thank you. This item is, what we're proposing is an intergovernmental agreement between Peoria County and the Department of Children and Family Services for reimbursement funding through the Title IV Social Security Act funding. It would provide reimbursements for legal representations for children involved in juvenile abuse and neglect court and the parents. This is a first-time opportunity. It's the U.S. Department of Health and Health Services reviewed the current act and has a new interpretation of that act and what administrative costs could be reimbursed, and determined that a percentage of legal representation should be reimbursed to those counties providing that representation. So we were partnering with the administrative office and reviewing this and collaborating with DCFS, and have been invited to participate with 5 or 4 other counties across the state of Illinois to pilot the reimbursement program, so that we can establish best practices and move forward and roll that out across the state of Illinois. There are 5 assistant public defenders, as Nate just mentioned, in the Juvenile Abuse and Neglect Court. Their salaries, along with 2 part-time guardian ad litems that are employed through the courts or contracted through the courts, can participate in this program, and the county can receive a partial reimbursement for those salaries or those contractual payments for those services.
How much money are we talking that we might get reimbursed on with this pilot program?
Currently, it's estimated at $70,000 roughly, based off of all those current salaries. Again, it's only a partial reimbursement, so it's not 100%.
But that's $70,000 less out of our pocket then.
Right. Part of it would be attributed to the public defenders program, and the other part of the reimbursement would go to the courts programs.
And if once they get this pilot program done, will they reimburse us more, possibly?
I'm not anticipating that the amount will increase because we are one of 5 counties, and so there are 102 counties across the state that will eventually be participating in this funding. It's not limited in the scope as it's not a one-time reimbursement, it's an ongoing annual reimbursement. So what those full dollars are, I'm not aware of.
Okay. Any questions, Steve?
I wasn't going to let you off easy, Renee.
Well,
I always think free money doesn't come without mandates. So I have to ask the question, are there mandates that are being required for either the courts or public defender or any of the affected parties that will lock us into meeting those mandates long term? If there are, what are those costs?
no, there are no new mandates. These are services that we're currently required to provide. The statutory requirements are not changing. This is just actually new money coming into Peoria County.
Answer your question, or?
Well, they're federal funds that are passed through to the state of Illinois through the Department of Children and Family Services.
So it's federal funds that the state's dispersing out then?
Right.
Okay. So,
Okay, I'll take that. I mean, again, my initial comment is there's no free money in this world. So there's typically somewhere along the line that, oh, this was the requirement or the mandate.
Right.
But
And
I was going to say, I can speak to that a little. There are some reporting requirements, and we reached back out along with some other counties to clarify, how much reporting, what kind of onerous is this going to be? And it's actually not going to be much more than what they're already tracking. So outside of reporting, and Nate may speak to this as well, but outside of reporting, I think really it's just keeping track so it can be reimbursed.
any other questions? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. Next is FY 2020 appropriations and court budgets for revised Aoic rapid relief funding. Renee?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, this is with the courts. The Administrative Office of Illinois Courts received COVID-19 rapid relief funding through the federal government, and I'm not sure if it's passed through the state of Illinois and then on to the administrative office. This is for technology needs to address any remote processes with the courts due to the pandemic, so that it's just funding to provide that technology. So the courts originally submitted a request to upgrade technology in various courtrooms to provide adequate use of this technology for a combination of a hybrid of in-person and remote proceedings. Currently, we didn't have that capability. So we submitted our requests, and the board approved on March 11th that initial request for these upgrades to courtrooms. Those projects are nearing completion, and we had one item that we were approved to purchase, and the courts determined that we did not want to utilize that money for that particular technology. We weren't at a place where we could sufficiently utilize the services, so we didn't want to buy something that we weren't able to use within a year's time. So we requested permission through the administrative office to revise our ask and apply that funding to a different project. That enabled the courts to partner with the sheriff's department and look at the technology that they currently have at the jail to communicate with the courts for all of our remote proceedings. This is equipment that was installed, golly, I don't know when, way before my time, very old equipment. And it was a closed circuit system, so therefore it could not Zoom with the courts is what the current practice is. And the Supreme Court modified their rules to allow us to open that up and not have the two-way. We can now have two-way communication. It does not have to be closed circuit, one-side communication. So therefore, we sought the quotes from Thompson Electronics, who has been determined in the past to be a sole source provider, vendor for these services because of the integration of all of this equipment with the electronic recording equipment that establishes the official court record. So we received their quote, submitted a request to Aoic for approval to modify those 3 rooms at the jail and update them with this new technology, and that's what you have before you. They approved our request and are providing the funding, and we're just asking for approval to appropriate the monies into the line items so that we can continue on with this project. It is a time-sensitive project. We have to complete everything within the state's fiscal year. Monies have to be, the projects have to be planned, installed, equipment purchased, installed, and then paid for by June 30th of this year and submitted back in a reconciliation document to the state of Illinois and to administrative office. So we're asking for approval today.
And the vendor can get that all done in that time frame?
Yes.
I guarantee?
As far as yesterday, they're waiting on the committee's decision before they'll.
Okay. Any questions? Steve?
I'm not going to let you off easy, but I'll make, this is not a question, it's a comment. So it looks like this will improve the service capability we provide. So that's a great thing. And the last piece of that comment is that it may also improve your budget for next year. So look forward to that. Thank you.
Improve our budget?
Yeah, reduce your budget costs because you're more efficient with what you have.
Well, and we appreciate the opportunity to work with the sheriff on this project as well because it does help enhance his programs, correct? Yeah.
Okay, any other questions before we call the vote? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Whoop. Aye. Okay. Whoop. Oh, I'm sorry about that. I need a motion to put this on the floor. Phil, okay, a second. Brandy, okay. Now, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thanks, Phil, for keeping me on track. We're up to miscellaneous right now. Is there anybody that has anything for miscellaneous? Sheriff?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just nothing pressing, but I just kind of want to give an update where we're at with staffing at the sheriff's office. It's still critical. And the reason I bring this up, because I think we're at the point right now where I literally have to consider ending some police service contracts. We're down 8 patrol deputies. We did just hire 3. They're at the academy. They'll be eligible for individual work in January. Unfortunately, 2 of those did come from the jail, so we were robbing Peter to pay Paul. As you're aware, there was a new, the chief judge placed out an administrative order last Friday where we've pretty much reopened operations at the jail, and that was several conversations with the judge as well as the state's attorney. But we have to find, strive for balance, and looking at the law enforcement and what they're dealing with on the street, we had to give them more ability to enforce some of the laws instead of just doing the paper notices, because it's not helping the problem if you can't remove it. Obviously, this is pending the new legislation, but in the meantime, we're going back to normal operations, and that order went out Friday, and the population already increased by 30 over the weekend, and it's been remained stagnant at that point. So I just want to try to be as transparent as possible with this committee as we move forward, but I have met with some of our service agencies and let them know this possibly could be on the horizon. It's nothing we want to do, but at this point, if we do not have the resources to provide the services, we have to look at that alternative. Thank you.
Sheriff, what will the municipalities that we're providing services do if we're not doing it for them?
Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
Okay, if we can't provide these contracts because we don't have the help, then what do these, most of them are municipalities, right? Small towns, villages, and so forth. What will they do for services? Will they have to find their own, or they just will have what the county normally has to provide?
Well, there's jurisdiction. I mean, obviously, if this comes to fruition, I mean, we'll have to meet with the state's attorney and look at the language of the contracts. However, a lot of these jurisdictions, we still have to police those areas anyway. It's just not going to be on the dedicated timeline, which is an FTE. For example, now the question is, I don't know, like a municipality, what would happen to something place like a West Peoria if they have their own requirements because of their population where they have to have some type of services. It's just part of the conversation. It's something, if this does not change and we do not get applicants in, these are, and I said this at the beginning of the year, this is a possibility. It's just a reality of it now. Unfortunately, we have had several applicants for the jail, but our success rate this far is about 50%. They're just lowering your hiring standards. You're having the applicants you typically would not hire, and they're just not making it through the training phase. And it's best for both parties. It's dangerous at that point for themselves as well as other employees. So each contract's different. For example, if it was an SRO contract that we elect to get rid of, a school resource officer, you'd still do police services, but it wouldn't be at the level that it was. So I am going to go to each of these service agencies. I've talked to many of them on the phone, but it's just really just being that transparent with them as well, because there is, obviously this affects them as well.
Anybody else have any questions they'd like to ask the sheriff? Okay. Well, thank you for the update, and we'll hope that you get more qualified applicants coming in soon. Anything else for miscellaneous for anybody? Okay, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.